to the March Madness CEO Connect. Anybody, how many people stayed up and watched the basketball game? I gave up on Michigan State, but I guess they came back and got close, so we should have more faith. And today, what time does Michigan play today?
12:40.
12:40, okay. So all those that are bosses have to grant their workers the opportunity to watch the game because it's team building, right? That's right. So Gary, you're saying that those folks that are late lunch. Well, we want to get right to the program as soon as possible today because Len Middleton is going to be speaking about some really important stuff, and he has been teaching at the business school and has traveled worldwide over the last few years and has learned a tremendous amount about so many things. I sent out the email to you choosing which of his topics we would cover, and it turned out that we picked up, I guess, on strategy, right? Tying strategy.
Continuous change.
Continuous change and execution. So we're going to cover the whole thing, and this is it teaches this to executive MBA students. It takes several months, so we're going to compress it today and get the Len wisdom in 45 minutes. But I think you'll find that it's a very exciting thing. And Len is a board member at United Bank and Trust, who is our sponsor. And there's some other board members here. Could you raise your hands? Rich Sheridan, Norm Herbert. I guess that's about it. And then there's several people here from the bank. Can you guys raise your hands? Okay, great. And we also have some wealth management people here. So if you guys need some help in managing your wealth, you want to handle that? Okay. So normally we go around and everybody has a chance to introduce themselves, but today there's so many people here. I think we had a full house that we're not going to be able to do that. So I'm just going to ask a few people to make introductions, and I've kind of pre-selected those. Hopefully I remember who everybody is that I've asked. If not, raise your hand. If you have something really urgent to talk to the group about, raise your hand and let us know. We'll create some time for it. I do want to say I've got two exciting programs coming up for CEO Connect in April and May. April, we have Aura Peskovitz, who is the chief executive of the whole health system at U of M. So we're really honored to have her here, and she'll be talking about what's going on with the health system in the future at U of M. And we're in a time of great change, as we know, in healthcare. How many people in the room? There's several people in the healthcare sector here. I know Lisa. Anybody else in the healthcare sector? Okay, John does healthcare placement for executives, right? So, and then in May, we have a real exciting opportunity that just came up, and that is the new Coach Hook of U of M will be here to speak. I want to thank Brad Labadie. Brad, raise your hand there. You all know Brad. And also Scott Draper, who was coming, but I don't think Scott is here yet, in arranging to bring the coach here to speak to our group. He's going to be talking about his approach to leadership, so it should be really exciting. And then we may wind down for the summer. We'll see what happens, unless there's some really cool things happen. So we have just a couple people make the introduction. Andy, just come on, stand up. Come on up here, Andy. Andy Chappelle, you all may know, and he's in a new gig, so I wanted him to get a chance to say what it is.
Right, I'm now a senior associate for Larry Eiler. My boss, his company's turning 24 years old this month, and I'm handling media relations for him. For the last 4 years, I've been a managing editor at Crane's Detroit Business in Detroit. Kind of got tired of making the commute and taking bullets for reporters who weren't covering their beats. Before that, I was the editor of the Ann Arbor Business Review and founded the Oakland Business Review in Oakland County, and then I was at the Ann Arbor News for 21 years before that. So.
Are you old enough to remember when we had newspapers?
Yes, I am.
Good. We know that AnnArbor.com is vitally struggling right now, and so we're hoping that we get good news coverage because there's so much going on in town, and we really have a hard time keeping up with it. So Art, another person, we just pass the mic over to Art. You could say who you are, Art.
Yeah, so Rob mentioned wealth management. I'm Art Donor from United Bank and Trust. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. I am responsible for the wealth management group here in the Washington market. We offer investment management services, financial planning services, and different trust and fiduciary services. And so those are the services that we offer, but the essence of our business is to really help people plan and live their lives how they would like to. We help them plan, structure their finances, and really work with them throughout their lifetime to help them achieve their goals and accomplish what they want to. I think that's really the essence of what we do, is help people live their lives the way that they would like to.
Thank you, Art. Let's see, Jay, where's Jay? Okay, Jay Cardula is new to town, new business, so I'll let Jay tell you about what he's up to.
Thanks, Rob. Jay Cardula with BrandWorks Detroit. We specialize in brand enhancement and creative marketing communications for companies that sell their goods and services in the B2B space.
Jay probably could go in the category of people in this room I've known the longest because I know when he was born.
We grew up on the same street.
Yeah. He was one of the Cardula family that lived across the street from me in Oak Park, so glad to have Jay in Ann Arbor. And Maggie, could you need the mic, right? Maggie's got a good loud voice, so
yeah.
Zena, both of you guys.
I coach hockey, so I'm good. My name is Megan Torrance, and I have a company called Torrance Learning in Chelsea. We design and develop custom online training for our clients. Although I seem to be doing less and less of that lately because I get sucked into some really cool events. There's the registration for the women in the room. The WXW conference registration went live last night. So if you go to wxwbusiness.com, thank you. And then the following day, because I can't say no to a good time, the Hands-On Museum is having its Tech Twilight. So the local tech event is now called Tech Twilight. We've got some great activities for kids. I like to think of it as like a science fair for all the tech companies in town. So it's a really, really good time. So.
Okay, thanks, Maggie. Zena.
Thank you. So I do content management, and I like to work with businesses that need people to work together better. And I love content.
That's why she's not a CPA, right, Steve?
That's right.
And let's see, Brad. You want to say hi? Brad's got a new role. Maybe you could tell us what you're up to, Brad.
Hello, my name is Brad Lavity. For the previous 9 years, I worked at the Michigan football office for Coach Lloyd Carr and Coach Rodriguez. Left there last summer and have made a move to inside the city of Ann Arbor, and I work at Kaplan Insurance Group. We sell property and casualty insurance as well as health benefits to businesses. So that is what I'm up to now, and loving it. We're with a great organization, and I'd love to tell you a little bit about it if you are interested. And again, I thank Rob for the opportunity to say hello to the group, and enjoy.
Yeah, should I pass it back to Lisa there too? So some of you met Lisa last week, but she's here last month.
I'm Lisa Hardy. I'm Senior Director for Blueprint Network. Blueprint Network is a HMO subsidiary of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, and we have over 670,000 members throughout the state of Michigan. We pride ourselves in providing innovative products and programs to keep healthcare affordable. And like I said, last month I was introduced in our President and CEO Kevin Klobuchar presented on healthcare reform. So that's really our greatest challenge and actually opportunity in the future. So we're going to continue to look at innovative ways that we can provide healthcare at affordable prices in the future, given all the challenges ahead of us.
And another aspect of CEO Connect that I think Lisa saw last time and several others of you have is that it's a community try to help one another. So she made an announcement about her daughter looking for an internship, and you got quite a few responses on that. So
thank you all.
Yeah. So that's another thing we'll do at the end here when Len's done is that people will have kind of an open mic, and I think of it as the Ann Arbor swap shop here. So if you have, you're looking for somebody to work for you, you got space, you're looking for an opportunity to use your skills in a new environment, it's a good way to say looking for a job, then you know, that's an opportunity to speak. So let's see, is anybody else that I had asked to speak? I can't remember. Bob. Okay, Norm, thank you.
Good morning, all. Thanks, Rob, for the opportunity and following Lisa. One of the exciting things that I'm doing currently is working on a countywide planning process as to how do we deal with the changes that are coming with healthcare reform. And Bob Gunzel and I are co-chairing a countywide committee in which we're trying to develop a model. So rather than have those that will be focused as the priority population with the changes, going to the emergency room, hopefully we can begin to change their practice and think about primary care physicians and other ways to access health care. So beyond that, I was with the university for about 35 years, retired. I'm doing financial consulting now, member of the board at United Bank, and a number of other things here in the community. Thanks.
And Scott, where's Scott?
Over here, Rob.
Okay, there you are.
I'm Scott Burrs. I run MT3, a local medical device design and development company here in Ann Arbor, so hopefully none of you need any of the products that we make. And I'm working with Rob and Len to restructure and do planning for the coming years, look to grow, so it's going to be an exciting year for us.
Thank you, Scott. And yeah, Scott mentioned that we're working together. You see on your sheet that Jim Woods and I and some of the other folks in this room are starting a new endeavor, which we're calling Great Lakes Advisory Center. And what we're doing, Scott's one of our first clients, is putting together advisory boards for small businesses with a quarterly meetings segment working on strategy, execution, and leadership development. So several people, Dennis Blanchett, who's over there, and I worked with a company for several years on this model. And what we hope to do is bring in folks to be resources for you. And some of the people are in this room that I've talked to about that. For example, Norm's thinking about doing that. Len's going to be doing that with me, Dennis. There's probably others of you that will be involved in it. We'll give you a roster of experts to choose from that can meet with you on a quarterly basis. So that's what's coming up. And if you're interested in talking about that, you can talk to me or Stephanie, and we'd be happy to tell you more about the advisory board. If you have any feedback on the name, let me know, because we're holding that right now and trying to figure out if it's at the right one. We wanted to use the term center because we hope it's a thought type of facility, an institution where people can really share not just service, but ideas about how to provide good advisory services to organizations and individuals. Okay, I think, Bob, I'm going to let you say hi and talk about United Bank a little bit. Bob is one of our sponsors and one of my, thank you very much, one of my consulting gigs, as is Blue Care Network, and I'm also now working for MEDC. So, and Bob's just back from Washington, so he's going to give us maybe a little scoop on what's going on in Congress in terms of banking legislation and things like that.
I'm not sure you want to hear. I'm Bob Chapman. I'm President CEO of United Bank and Trust. We're a financial services company. We have 4 lines of business. We have wealth management that's already spoken. We have banking. We have mortgage. And we have structured finance. And I would like to put down the rumor that banks aren't willing to lend. We have liquidity. We're willing to lend. And so if you have some challenges, please give us a call and see us, and we'd be happy to sit down and try to put a solution together for you. We have multi different ways to look at trying to help solve your problems. So I think the important thing we're a community financial services company. We live, we work, and our job here is to try to make our local economy better. So thank you.
All right, I wish we had time for everybody to speak, but there's just so much going on right now that I can't do that. But we will have open mic at the end. But for now, I wanted to turn the mic over to Len Middleton. Len is professor at University of Michigan, and he teaches entrepreneurship and family business. And I've had a chance to work with Len on the MBA programs, work with the MBA students. One of the things that he's done has been very interesting for the university. It's really kind of changed the whole direction of education at the Ross School, is the MAP programs, the Multidisciplinary Action Projects. And really, if you read about the business school now, it emphasizes action learning, and that they get the students out into the communities. And actually, Len has been part of the global MAP program, which is where I met him. And so he has sent students all over the world, every continent, I believe. I don't think yet to Antarctica yet, but yeah, sort of. New Zealand and South, that's what that was. And he sends out these teams, and then he monitors the team's progress. And if they fall apart, he says, Rob, could you talk to them? So that's our partnership. And Len also is a multi-time entrepreneur. He's been in the medical device business, energy business, all kinds of different things. He's been part of a family business. So he comes at this talk today from a multiple perspective. And he's an all-around good guy. He's also got a little bit of a food business going on in Manchester, where tomatoes, is that the big thing? Yeah, so tomatoes, and I don't know what he's growing in the back 40, but that's between him and whoever he's working with. Len, it's my pleasure to introduce you and have you speak here.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, everybody. I just was thinking on the way over here, Rob, it's been 10 years since I started working with you this month.
Yeah.
And I had a really good team coach, and because of health issues, she was not able to do it any longer. And some of the folks in the community said, you need to get to know this guy, Rob Pasick. So we brought him in, and I thought, the lady that I had doing it, I didn't think anybody could do it better. And Rob came in, and he took the program several notches up. When my MBA students couldn't play well, I'd send them to Rob. You know, I could yell at them, but I had their grade. But I needed somebody with Rob's skill set to really talk to them. And he was great. He would sit down with the teams and say, and really go after them and say, look, you're quiet, and you talk too much. How are you two going to work together? That type of thing. And it really has made a difference. And every year I still have students come back to me and say, how's Dr. Pasick? You still here for me? I know he's helped quite a few of them with their soft skills. So this actually started a few months ago when Rob called me up and said, hey, Len, do you believe in the Constitution? I said, sure, yes, Rob. He said, do you believe in free speech? And I said, yes, Rob, I believe in free speech. He said, good, you're on the docket for March. So today I wanted to talk to you about what I'm seeing, and like Rob said, I do a lot of travel. I'm fortunate I get to see a lot of changes that are coming around. And so today I wanted to talk to you about a new way of thinking about strategy. We're about to enter this era, what I'm calling continuous change. And it's going to be predicated on, do you have the talent to drive a strategy, and not the old type of strategy where everybody created a plan, put it in a nice book, it went on to credenza, and it really then, it had dust on it and so forth. And how do you pull that off and make it an integrated part of your business? Because what I'm going to walk you through today is you're going to see some amazing changes coming about. And if you're not staying pace of it, you're not going to survive. Okay? So did everybody have handouts? There's extras. Does everybody have handouts today? Okay. So if you turn to the next page, just going through the agenda here a little bit, this era of continuous change. 5 years ago, I would have never thought, I just got a text this morning from Bloomberg on my phone, and it says that Groupon has a $25 billion valuation. The company is 27 months old. In the last 12 months, they've had $950 million in revenue. This is amazing. I would have never thought that. If you told me 5 years ago we were going to have a company that can grow this quickly, and this pervasive, and be in about 48 countries today, it's unbelievable. And then all of us have watched what's happened in the Middle East, and things like Facebook and LinkedIn, and what's happened to the Middle East. I mean, this era of change and how information can go just in a light around the world so quickly now. And I'm going to talk more about some of the things I'm seeing. But this is going to lead through, as we talked about some of the concerns of strategy, and then how do you think about execution? I'm going to show you the old model of strategy, and then what I've been working with is more of a new model, really trying to focus more on how do you execute your business today. And then to do that, how do you think about the communications and the talents you're going to need, and around some of the metrics at the end. So look at the size of the corporations. This was a conversation last October. There's a famous consultant, Gary Hamble. He's a Michigan grad. He got his PhD at the business school. And he was in last fall for reunion weekend speech. And he had this chart up there, and I thought it was amazing. He said, here's the growth of companies. In about 1980, 1990, the size of companies went down, or started to go down. And I pulled him aside afterwards, and I've known him for a long time, and I said, Gary, there's something missing in this chart, is the efficiency of business. What is that going to do to how businesses are going to be scaled and staffed and structured? And he and I are going to work on something together this summer looking at this, because most companies are so functionally set up, but if you're going to go to a much smaller, more efficient model, it's going to probably be around more of a team-based approach, and not how you viewed like the old Tiger teams of 5 or 10 years ago, but more teams that are more morphing around the business, and how do you pull resources. So you're going to see a different stratification, I think, of a structure that's going to be predicated on this type of efficiency and size. China, China, China. Well, as of last week, unfortunately, you're hearing a lot about Japan. But I did 10 trips last year to China, and probably 7 the year before, and I'm probably going to do 4 or 5 this year. I'm trying to cut it down. And everybody's worried about China. I'll tell you, China has its own issues. If you take Beijing and Shanghai out of the mix, it's really a third world country. I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of the second tier cities, and they have huge environmental problems. They have huge educational problems. They have not addressed a lot of their social issues. They think they're going to compete against the U.S. I'm telling you, I'm not worried about it. And something else is going to affect China, and they're worried about, is Vietnam. They have a country in their back door that has 92 million people, has 30% lower labor rate, 40% lower material rates, okay? And they have infrastructure like you can't believe, okay? Right now they're having a little trouble because they overextended themselves. But they have a feeder system with Laos and Cambodia. It'll take them up to 300 million people, and they're right at China's back door. And they just signed an agreement with Philippines and Micronesia and Malaysia, so they also will work together. And so, China's got its own issues right now. They're not going to be able to compete against us as we get more organized here in the United States. And they're going to have their own issues of challenge with these up-and-coming countries are starting already to take away some of their competitive advantage. So globally, there's some huge changes coming about. And I would tell you, the country that I would watch is Vietnam. And it always freaks me out when I leave the airport, because the airport tax at the sign, it says, please pay your $20 in US dollars. You have to read the small print that says Vietnamese dong if you want to pay, and Vietnamese dog. They want US dollars. They really have not, they've pretty much forgot about the war we had with them 30 years ago. Okay? So you're seeing real changes, and what I wanted you to take away from this slide is that we're not really a first, second, third world economies. We're actually 4 economies now, and I'm going to talk some more about how we integrate our change to get our competitive advantage back here in the U.S. to stay ahead of the Chinas and the Russias and the Indias of the world, and then how do we start to watch some of these up and coming countries too. The next slide is, what's next? What is starting to become hot in the world? Last month's Economist had a great article about the food business, and how the population in the world is going to go from about 7 to 9 billion between years 2040 and 2050. Okay? And we're not seeing the increases in food production, food capability. We have smaller farmland coming about as well in a lot of these countries. It's not just a U.S. issue, it's a China issue, it's a Russia issue. How are we going to feed? Right now, a head of cabbage in Shanghai is $30 a head. And any farmers in the room? Anybody a farmer? I can tell you as a farmer, with cabbage seed, you can close your eyes, you can throw it behind your back, and it'll come up. Okay? So it's about the easiest thing to grow. But we're going to see more demands placed on not only food, but and I just read something where there's the other day on the spike that we've had, even locally, a spike in food prices. But you're also going to see it in water resources with this increase in population. The other things I'm seeing is, what's kind of neat for me is the growing piece of entrepreneurship, and I think we're calling it more e-ship now to try to give it a little new name and a little more buzz. With our students, our entrepreneurship courses are just packed. We have waiting lists for entrepreneurship courses. We offer 19 courses now on entrepreneurship at the business school. The engineering school is starting to offer courses. I teach a course to actually non-business school faculty I do 50 at a time, and not try to make them business people, but just give them the essence of what an MBA is with the entrepreneurship piece. And it's an amazing process. And how they would then come closer to industry and understand how to work better with the business world. And the reason I'm telling you this is there's 2,000 people, anytime we offer this course, there's 2,000 faculty from U of M trying to sign up for it. And I can only do 50 at a time, so we're working our way through the list. It's amazing to see that, and they want to work too, because I was worried when we started teaching this course that faculty wouldn't work, okay? But we actually work them pretty hard. As you know, energy resources is coming under more constraints. I'm just glad we're not seeing more people are talking about less now about nuclear as of last week, and I'm glad we're seeing less talk about clean tech. But yes, we have to solve this. The mobile capacity too. What's happening around the world with mobile capability, and everything's getting smaller, more miniaturized. I had to recently explain to my daughter about what a typewriter is. You know, that type of thing. Made me really feel old. But if any of you get to travel, one of my favorite things to do is in Hong Kong is to go into the phone stores. And there, the manufacturers have all the power. In this country, the carriers have all the power. And you see some of the coolest phones. Thumb readers, scanners, credit card readers right on the phones. There, people get a new phone about every 3-4 months. Okay? Here, we probably do it every 3 years. And you see some amazing technology that's just coming about on the mobile application side. Okay? And then lastly here, major changes in academia, what I'm seeing is that, you know, and any of you follow the University of Phoenix, have you seen some of their ads? They have some really sharp ads, some really crisp messaging. I just watched an ad recently, and at the end it was University of Phoenix. And I keep telling my bosses at U of M, you need to start watching this. They have a 38% gross margin, okay? They're making money, they have 700,000 students. And we need to start looking at this technology and how we're gonna leverage technology in our classrooms. We just built a beautiful new building, the Ross building, but it's, you know, we got massive overhead with a building of that size and scale. And this organization does not have that. They have some bricks and mortar, but a lot of it they're delivering through technology. And it's going to change. And you know, my bosses just keep saying, nah, they have no brand, we have all this accreditation. And they are right, they're right on that. But you know, I keep thinking, I'm young enough to remember the Japanese cars in the 70s. We laughed at them too. How many of us laugh at Honda and Toyota today? Okay? So there's some major changes coming in how education is going to be delivered. One of my favorite topics, this convergence of industries. You know, in my day we used to look at, you know, you had the steel industry, you had the mining industry, you had the pharmaceutical industry. You're not seeing that anymore. You're seeing such a convergence, and I know some of the folks in this room have iPads. I mean, is an iPad really, you know, what box would you put that into? Is a hardware device? Is it a software device? Is it an internet device? What industry would you classify an iPad in? Okay? It's all starting to blur. And those lines of the old standard industries are going away. And then the bottom right corner here, I have one for you. I just looked at a medical device recently. I'm doing a project, and it has a software chip in the device, and it has a drug delivery mechanism at the end. What industry would you classify that? I have no idea, because you're taking software, medical device, and is it pharma or biotech, where the drug delivery stuff on the end of that medical device. So you're seeing this, what we're seeing now is this really the start of a convergence of industries and how that's going to affect the change. Talent. I'll tell you, one of the great advantages of teaching is that, boy, you get to really see talent. You get to know what you would want to hire and what you wouldn't want to hire when you're teaching. But we're going to move now from what we call a knowledge economy to what I would call a talent economy. Okay? And in the knowledge economy, it was all about modeling and data. And could you find the information? A lot of the courses I teach, actually every team is assigned a librarian today. And because at business school we have 106 databases. And these librarians are magical. I mean, they have magic fingers that, hey, if I need any kind of data from anywhere, within 10 minutes, it's in my inbox. Here, Len, here you go, here's what you need. Okay? And the amount of resources that are available through that knowledge economy is now going to transcend to a talent economy. Because how do you take that kind of data and modeling and then apply it in a way that you're executing and working at your performance? Okay, so the game is going to up again. And it's really going to be centered around what I'm seeing as this need for this talent and talent economy. And I'll talk more about that in some little bit slides. And lastly in this section is this culture of performance. Okay? This is what I was talking about earlier, what I'm seeing. It's going to take a different management style. It's definitely going to take a different strategy style, which I'm going to talk about in a minute here. But we're going to be looking at more and more talent. I just hired a kid to come work for me that was one of my students a few years ago. And I see I got a couple of great ones here. I'm glad to see them come back here and contribute to Michigan, because I've been worried about we're losing too much of our young brain power. So good to see a couple of you guys come back. And this is the young pillars now of our community. And we need to keep bringing those folks back here and keep them here. But what I'm seeing is the student I hired, he was a 4.3 undergrad, all 4 years at Michigan, right, which is pretty amazing. Someday I'll figure out how many A+s he had to do that. He's personable, and I put him on teams of undergrads with MBAs, and he kicked their butt in performance. And so you know that you got to find, this is going to be different ways that you're looking to hire talent. No more job description, no more, more maybe placing ads, but how do you really find the capability of folks that can execute? And Rob, I've worked with Rob for many years, and he's done a lot of testing and personality testing and stuff. And that's been really great to help me figure out which boxes of capabilities you want to have. And this is going to become the real need that you're going to have, is that you have real talent in your organization. The talent that knows how to execute. It's not going to be it's going to be self-driven, their own leadership styles and their own capabilities going to come into play. And what I say here down here is this builders versus managers. You're really going to need folks that know how to build your organization, okay? And not the ones that know how to manage it to a box, but the ones that can also manage the box, but also look beyond the box, okay? As they're seeing, new changes in their business and new competition, and it's not going to be competition just in your backyard or around the world. And how do you bring that back and make yourself more competitive? Okay? And that's going to take a different mentality. I just interviewed some executives for a friend of mine, and he hired 4 new executives to work in his business. And he said, well, what do you think, Len? And I said, every one of the ones I interviewed said that they wanted to go home at 3:30. And he said, he's a good friend of mine, and I said, Jerry, you got the wrong team. And he looked at me and he said, really? We just spent months hiring these folks. I said, yeah, but they don't want to go home at 3:30. Okay? You're building this organization. You need folks that can work, and they're not afraid to come in at 7 a.m. and maybe not go home at 7 p.m. Okay? These folks want to do the 9 to 3:30 thing. You have the wrong workforce. So I'm glad he's my good friend, because he had a very blank stare looking at me. And about a month later, he called me up and he said, you're right. I think, now what do I do? And I said, okay, I'm not sure how you fire them, but I know some labor law attorneys that you should talk with. And then how do we put in a process in place to really get the right kind of talent? And he did that. So as we're thinking of this new era of strategy, there is a lot of issues with strategy, as you know, and it really hasn't changed in 20 years, unfortunately. So I want to just talk about some of the concerns, and I'm going to gloss over some of this. There is a lot of weaknesses that we have not looked at how to put budgeting in process and staffing in place. And we've used strategy as a very linear approach. And you do it for a month, you create a great strategic plan, you put it under cadenza, it creates dust, collects dust, and we don't look at it again. Okay? And strategy has had some of that, and even how we taught it at Michigan definitely needs to change. We have not focused on execution. We've always just focused on what I call strategic thinking, a little bit of strategic planning, but not strategic doing. And I'm going to talk more about strategic doing in a minute here. Okay. The next slide is winning and losing. Do you guys remember this? Some of you remember this book that came out in 1981, In Search of Excellence, the Robert Waldman and Tom Peters book? I love that book because it reminded us that everybody said, oh, the Japanese are going to take over America at that time. And it was these 2 authors that said, wait a minute, time out here. There's about a dozen companies that are doing some amazing work, and they're taking on the foreign competition, and they're winning. Okay? And I will tell you that we have some of these great case studies, even in Michigan. I do a lot of work with Herman Miller out in Holland, Michigan. They have a factory that Toyota Consulting comes in and about 3 times a year to learn from them of what they're doing. They're so far beyond lean manufacturing. They didn't implement lean manufacturing because lean manufacturing makes you take out the brain of the worker. They said, no, we want to capture the education of the worker. Who best to tell us how to do this job better than the people doing it every day? Okay? When you go through this factory, the greenhouse it's called, it's amazing. They have 100 pounds of waste a month at this factory. I think I have more of that at my house than what they have at.
Hold the mic a little bit farther away.
Am I too much echo? Okay. And this factory, I don't need this.
Yeah, you do.
Do I? Is it okay? Jamie, can you hear me okay? Or?
I can, but I think he wants you to have it.
Oh, okay, he wants me to have it, okay. So this factory is really just amazing. They have they run 12 lines out of there. You know, they have skylights in there, there's light coming in, the lights in the factory go down, that type of thing. They don't use any boxes, they reuse blankets. When they create a chair, they have the air-on chair, they throw a blanket over it, it goes shipped out, the blanket comes back after 8 or 10 times, they wash it, reuse it. It's an amazing facility. So I'm here to tell you that, you know, and they have this execution strategy process that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute, and it really works. Okay? They empower their workers. They look at their strategy. They start their meetings with, what is our strategic goals? How are we acting on it? Not like most of us do, is what is the crisis that we're looking at right now? They stop and they say, look, how are we, every meeting we have, what are we doing? How are we executing on our vision? How are we executing on our goals? There's a very different philosophy there. And if any of you want to see that, I can easily set up a tour of that facility. Like I said, it's really, it'll blow you away. But I was just there recently, and they had 300 GE executives walking through there just to see what they were doing. Okay? So we have great case studies here in Michigan of companies that are executing their strategy and executing it very well. On the losing side, I would tell you, and it pains me to say this, as I used to work at Ford many, many years ago, but you got to get this right too. I'm going to talk about culture and performance in a minute here. But Ford really, under one of his previous CEOs, tried to GE everything they did. They hired the GE consultants. They tried to change their culture overnight. And it really screwed up the organization. It really sent them backwards. Okay? So you have to be careful when you try to do this. Okay? It has to be paced and timed and put in looking at your culture, looking at your capability, your people. And Ford tried to do this overnight. 360 feedback systems. They had none of that type of culture that would gravitate to what GE built over 30 years. Okay? GE didn't start this overnight. They've been moving in this direction for decades. And Ford tried to do it very quickly. And it failed. So what about strategy here? You know, the last 20 years, this discipline really hasn't changed. Some of you remember in '79, Michael Porter came out with the 5 forces model. We still teach that today. It's a very good model. It has some weaknesses, but it's a very good model. But my point is other disciplines have brought out new frameworks, new models, new tools. And the strategy side, we're still teaching stuff probably from about 20 years ago. Okay? And you're welcome. I didn't put a 2x2 matrix in here. It's usually something business school faculty do, is you've got to have a 2x2 matrix. I spared you from another one of those. Okay? But looking at strategic planning and execution, this new era strategy, I'm calling it. If you go to the slide 15, you look at the strategy development approach. This is the old model. Really looking at how do you start your strategic vision. Usually work through what we call external analysis, and that's looking at market trends and changes to the business from the bigger perspective of your industry, your market, your customers, and how that is evolving. And then you turn into what does your company look like? How do you do a current state on your company? And through that, you have external information, you have internal information. What is the strategic options that are available to your business? And then how do you put a plan together then to execute on some of those options? But the problem with strategy is, in most organizations, most companies, that's where it stops. Okay? We don't put budget, we don't do the budgeting process, linking it to strategy. We all do a budget process, I realize that, but we don't link it to strategy. Okay? And we also don't talk about implementation, or if we do talk about implementation, we talk about next steps being just a timeline. Okay, here's a timeline of the next year, the next 3 years of processes that have to happen. And then we stop, but there's no metrics around those processes. There's no assigning responsibility to those processes, okay? And that's where this new era strategy has to change if we're going to remain competitive, is how do we think about our execution? And I'm going to show you in the next couple slides how you start to link that front-end process that we've taught for 20 years, really to what I'm calling the second half, that I think is even more important, is how do you really execute on your strategy? So the next side is this continuous process is really to show you more about how you link processes together between your strategy, your planning, with the execution pieces. And it's not a linear process, it's a continual process of, you know, as you're seeing changes going on in your workplace and the environment, and how do you bring that back in, but then bring it down to an individual level, which we didn't do in the past strategic planning processes. We just did it at the higher level, at the business unit level, at the organizational level. But how do you drive it down through to the individual level in the organization and make those folks more responsible and more knowledgeable about what they should be doing and how they should be executing, okay? I'm going to skip the caveats piece just in the time, but I want to talk about a little bit on preparing for execution too. As you're thinking about strategy execution, be careful of, do you have the right culture? Do you have the right talent? I don't want to send any companies or organizations backwards, okay? Companies that do this and do it well, this gets seeded in properly over a little bit of period of time where they're developing that capability, they're sharing this information, they're putting this process in place. The worst thing that when I teach executive MBAs, and I hear this from their companies, is when they go back to their companies, especially the ones I've taught to their CEOs, the companies all hate it because they know when on the Monday morning after they've been in for the 2-day residency, that there's a change coming. It's like, and they can always tell what flavor of the month that they're changing towards based on what classes they've had. So I would caution you, this stuff is hard, it takes time, and I would tell you to go a little slow, not too slow, but a little slower in how you implement an execution process. Okay? So I have this figure 8 model on slide 19. This is kind of trying to give you and I can show you on the next slide too. How do you think of a more holistic approach, where you're taking planning and you're integrating into individual performance? Okay, no more of this linear process. Then you stop. It goes on the shelf. But how do you keep it as integral part of your management, your day-to-day management, your quarterly management, your yearly management, but tying it back from the vision of the company down to the goals of the individual. Okay. And how do you work through some of those pieces to get that type of integration so that the workers down at the lowest levels of the organization understand what the company should be doing. Okay. And then the next slide is this complete process. It's going, how do you go from the vision to the strategy piece, which I like to call thinking piece, right? We all like that part. And then out of that comes your plans, right? But then how do you execute it? And I call that the doing part. How do you execute the strategy, and how do you push it down throughout the organization and make people accountable for the areas that they're responsible for? So how do you individualize it? And really, I'm a metrics guy. So how do you make it more metric based so that they can understand what their goals are? How do those metrics change over time? Okay? And as we look at new innovation and new ideas, companies they try to apply the old metric systems to new thinking. And it hurts a lot of the companies. I'm working with Syngenta right now, and a great company. It's a Swiss company, but they haven't had any new innovation in the last 5 years because they're taking a corporate model of here's what we have to hit for ROI and returns and the type of investment we were going to put in. Well, that fits for the existing program. But if you're trying something new, you need a different metric base to allow it to be nurtured until it can start to reap those kind of rewards and returns. Right? So as you're thinking about execution, again, how do you push it down to the individuals, the metrics? We're starting to use some of it with dashboards, putting dashboards in place as well on the individual level. And driving your business down to what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to accomplish? So as we think about communication strategy, I had a nice little quote there from the late C.Q. Prabhupada, who passed away about a little over a year ago. But it's going to take a different type of commitment as we look at slide 22. And I'm not going to read through them, but how do you create this culture of performance? Okay. And it's going to be, a lot of this is going to have to be done through communication. I have a little funny story for you. I have a 91-year-old grandfather who's still running his business after 72 years now. Yeah, good genes, I think. And he said he always believed in this. And he said, look, as a CEO, when you're laying in bed at night and you're staring at the ceiling and you're starting to communicate your vision and your goals, you're probably talking about it enough. Is what he'd say. And my grandmother said, so that's what you've been muttering all these years. Okay? But it's really take a different type of executive leadership that's really focused on the communication pieces and focusing on, how do you get the information out and keep, reinforcing that information throughout the organization. Right? And then lastly here, in order to succeed, the performance management piece and looking at that slide 24 of talent management, I talked a little bit about a different recruiting process. But I think it's also going to require a different process within the organization of how do you, do leadership development. The days are, and I'm glad my boss isn't here, but the days of sending folks to our executive center and letting them take a 3-day or a 5-day course, then they come back and they have no idea how to implement it. Or, the organization's not ready for it. Those days are going to be gone. I taught a course last summer for a big Chinese company. And we had some of the normal classroom sessions. But then we took 4 or 5 ideas from their business and said, look, let's take what you learned in a classroom and show you how to apply it in a map-type program. And it was really transformational to the organization where they had these 4 or 5 products. We brought the CEO in. They presented not to me, but to the CEO of the company. And it really gave their young middle management leadership, their next generation leadership, some really great skill sets. Because they learned not only the textbook side of it, but they also learned how to really apply it within their business units. And it really changed starting to really change the organization. But this is hard to do. This is not easy for companies to deal with how do you take, this theory of how do you take theory and meld it with practice. This is not going to be easy to do. But if you're developing that kind of talent, you're going to need to figure out how to apply your knowledge. Okay? And just going to a course is not going to change that, as well as how do you have courses that do both. Okay? I talked about the recruiting number 3 here, how I think it's going to change too. The days of, you just put out the job ad and interview folks and then hire. I don't think you can take that risk anymore. I think you really need to know the talent that you're going to hire. You can't lose time because you're going to hire somebody like my friend Jerry did and find out 3 months in that you hired the wrong people. And then you're going to lose another 3 months trying to figure out how to get rid of them, and then another 3 months to start the process again. You're not going to have that year and a half process to be able to do that anymore. You're going to have to figure out ways that the talent that you're hiring is going to come in, is going to be able to execute and perform at the level that you're going to need. Michael Dell always tells a great story. He used to come to campus here every year, and then when he retired, he didn't. Then he came back in. But he tells a great story of that he's not the smartest person in Dell. And I've known Mike over the years. He's a pretty bright guy. Right? But he said what he was great at was always hiring talent. He knew when he was a $100 million business, he needed people that knew how to run a $300 million business. And that's what he hired. When he was a $300 million business, he hired people that knew how to run a $500 million business. And then when he knew he was going to make a launch at the $1 billion mark, he went to IBM one day and he hired their 3 best executives that really understood how to execute, okay? And he grew to the next level. He didn't hire for today's capability. He was always thinking about what capability am I going to need tomorrow. And it was very telling. He does it very humbly, but it's not. He's actually a very smart guy. He knew what his organization was going to need as it grew and how to execute towards that growth. And one of the things I've actually admired about him recently is he's come back in and taken over. And we've done some projects with him for Dell over the years. And so we've watched them go from a pretty decent company to very badly managed by their previous CEO. And now he's come back and he's really transformed the organization because the previous CEO thought all competitive advantage was based on cost. And it's not. Cost is not sustainable, right? And he basically cut the company down to its bone through cost. You can't compete on cost, okay, for the long term. Yes, you have to be cost conscious. Yes, you have to watch your costs. But you can't have a CEO that just says, how do we keep whittling it down, and not investing in your future. And I was glad to see him come back because now he's changed a lot of the things. They had a call center in Panama that just made absolutely no sense, okay? And it took you 9 calls to get an answer from Dell on your laptop. If you're going to call 8, 9, 10 times to get an answer, you're not going back there. You're going to buy Apple, you're going to buy HP. And he's really looked at that and said, no, we have to be smart about our costs. He brought it back to the U.S. And now, if you watch their stock, they're slowly starting to come back. On the bottom there, just one last point on that one, on succession. I'm involved in my family business. I mentioned my granddad. I actually have a barn that has whiteboards in it. And it's a very nice barn, but it has wall-to-wall whiteboards. And I actually have a succession process outlined for my grandfather's company and how it's going to change over time and what type of talent I'm going to need. Okay? I don't show this to anybody except a few people within the organization. But I have the master board, widget board, that I'm moving pieces around. If I lose an executive or they don't have the capability, I know who I can move around, or boxes that I'm going to have to fill. I'm not waiting to then fill that talent. I have it already thought through of the skill sets I'm going to need. If this person leaves, this person retires, where I'm going to move you out. And I overlay that with where I think the business is going. And how do I drive that type of decision making? Because it's an older energy business, and we're not going to be, in my generation, in my kids' generation, it's not going to be an energy business. It's going to be something different. But how am I thinking about the executives that I'm going to need to bring in, and the management I'm going to need to bring in, the talent I'm going to have to bring in to help transform that company, to keep it competitive. So I would tell you that last box to me is really important. It's the succession and management planning process. Okay. On the next slide is individual KPIs. As some of my BBAs in the room know, my former BBAs, and then one of my LSNA guys here, I always harp on them, shut the TV off and read more. Okay? So they're used to be hearing this, but they're going to have to. How do you keep your skill sets going? If you're going to do this type of era of talent management and strategy execution, how do you look at your own individual skill sets and starting to measure, have your own dashboard, have your own KPI system individually for how are you learning? How is your skill sets evolving? How are you working on your presentation skills, your marketing capability, your analytical capability? You're going to have to do more and more of this for yourselves, but also for your company as well. And if strategy execution is going to work, it's because you have a workforce that thinks this way, that they're worried about how they're performing. They have their own internal clock and measurements of how they're performing, and trying to improve upon that to remain competitive. And then, I wanted to show you just a case, just to end this up with a case with the U.S. Olympic Committee. I did a project a couple of years ago, and they have 44 sports in the U.S. Olympic Committee, and they had no idea what each sport did. For instance, women's figure skating. The average life of an executive director for women's ice skating was 8 weeks. Yeah. So we looked at it and said, well, why 8 weeks? Well, we interviewed a couple of past directors, and it said 4 weeks to look at the job, 2 weeks to realize you couldn't do the job, and 2 weeks to give notice. And that was 8 weeks. So, yeah, but they had 5,000 board members. Totally dysfunctional. But the leadership of the U.S. Olympic Committee had no idea that this type of dysfunction was going on. So we said, look, let's look at your strategy process. Let's integrate that with how you execute. So we created a basic spreadsheet you'll see on the next page, and I can send it out to anybody. I have a nice sanitized version of it I can send you. And I'll email it to Rob today as well. But looking at how do they measure each of these 44 sports? How do we put a strategic planning process in? It just started to capture the data. But over time, how to use that, not to beat on the sports, okay, but to empower the different sports so that they can execute better, okay? And today, I can tell you, from the board perspective, it's amazing. When I started working with them, I looked at all the gold medals they won, and was amazed that they won those. But now, from a business aspect, they're winning gold medals on the business side because they really did adopt a strategic planning and execution process for each of the 44 sports. And they communicated it really well to each executive director. They've not had any turnover in women's ice skating now. They took the board from 5,000 members down to 11, a much more manageable group. Okay? And they have history. They know how much they gave women's figure skating next year. They have an idea what they're going to be able to provide for them for the next few years, for past years, the next few years. And it's really it's been fun for me to watch this transformation because, like I said, you go to the facilities, you see the athletes, you see what they've accomplished on the athletic side, but now you take this kind of execution process and you put it to the business side of the U.S. Olympic Committee, and it's been transformational to watch them really now take on a different set of goals and execute those goals. So I'm curious to see with the next Olympics, although we're going to be able, I think, to be able to even do more because they have much better understanding of the resources and how to leverage the resources. So just to wrap up on the last side here too, I just want to leave you with just a few thoughts that, folks, this is really hard to do, okay? This is not something you can implement overnight. You have to be careful of your culture. Do you have the right capabilities? Because you can send your organization backwards too. Companies that do this well take a little longer perspective when they implement an execution process. And I wanted to leave you with that and make sure you have the right talent in place and how you're thinking of talent, but that talent that understands that they're there because they can perform. Okay? They understand that they're tracking their own metrics. They're also tracking your own business metrics for you. And they're executing at a much higher level, because as I bring this back to this continuous changing world that we're living in, how you did business in the past is not going to be how you do business in the future. And I'm enjoying being on the board of United Bank, because I think I'm giving Bob and Norman over there a little more gray hair these days, because what I'm seeing with my 20-year-olds and how they're, how they look at life, and that's why I love to teach that courses. Their thoughts about technology and how it's going to be managed is going to be completely different than how we're doing things today. And that's your next generation. And if the U.S. is going to remain competitive and Michigan is going to come back, it's because we have this kind of, more higher level process of strategy and execution that will get us back into a much more competitive environment. So Rob, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay. So we have at least 20 minutes of Q&A. So if you want to, what I would suggest is take 5 minutes, 3 minutes actually, just talk at your table about what comes up here, and see if each table could come up with an interesting question for them, because there's so much that we've covered. And I'd like you to be able to process it. I think the learning process is listen, talk about it, ask, and then move on. So talk amongst your tables, and then we'll come up with some questions for Lynn. All right, if you can think about a question per table, we'll just go around real quick. When you're ready, raise your hand. I'm going to take my, I've got this little new instrument that I got from Hong Kong. It's called a brain meter. And it measures the brain power at every table. And we'll see who gets to go first here. Okay, so let's see. All right, we got a high count over here. Okay, all right. I think I'm going into it here. The point card, this table right here. Jim, go. Yeah, your question. Hold on. Introduce yourself and then ask the question.
My name is Jen Baez, and I'm a sales manager at Google. Obviously a larger company, but at this table we're talking about applying the strategic planning to more of a startup atmosphere, and when particularly in the hiring capabilities or hiring plan of a startup, taking your recruitment statement on hiring for the present with keeping in mind your needs for the future, and balancing your need to getting stuff done immediately and what you need to get done now, but balancing that with knowing you're going to need that talent to execute on maybe something a little bit different in the future. So how do you balance that in your hiring process? Should you sacrifice one over the other?
Okay, good question. How do you balance that? Well, I think you have to do both. You're going to have immediate needs, but you got to be more strategic in your hiring too. We were just talking at our table here that you may take 6 months to fill it. You have to fill it with the right individual, okay? Especially if it's a key function that you're going to need going forward. And this part of your business is going to really develop. Spend more time. But if you have an immediate need, obviously you're going to have to fill it because you need to execute the day-to-day business as well. And I'm sure Rich is. Before you take a drink, Rich. But I'm sure what Rich will tell you too is that's probably something that you struggle with is always finding that talent for startups. Okay? That comes with part of the game is it's not so much the technology side because we have great processes, but in this town, how do we find more of that talent that marry with the technology? I'm sure it's a challenge here.
Well, and I would say this is a lesson I learned a long time ago from a great boss who said to me, Rich, you got to be recruiting all the time.
Yes.
And when I was an engineering manager when he told me that, and I'm like, Bob, why would I be recruiting now? I don't have a position. He's like, Rich, be recruiting all the time. And so I'm always recruiting. And I will also say that at Menlo, we use a make mistakes faster philosophy. We're bringing people in all the time. We don't hold on to them unnaturally. If it doesn't fit, they move on, and they move on pretty quickly. And there's a little bit of, sometimes you get into analysis paralysis when you're trying to find the right person. You got to give them a chance to, you got to give both sides a chance to figure out whether there's a fit or not.
Yeah.
Len, can you let Gary talk about this? They've got kind of interesting process at United that they use for this.
One of the things we do at United in this regard is we do a lot of competency work before we do a hiring process. We've got a matrix that everybody works off of, the same matrix. So in this whole idea of talent and recruiting talent, it's something that we really focus on. We try to identify the competencies that we're looking for before we even start the hiring process. And so that helps us in evaluation of the talent that we're looking for, because we know it's something that we got to get that we don't have today. So that's one of the things.
And you've waited a while for that. I mean, you don't hire until you match that, which is what I like.
You know, while I got the mic, seize the opportunity, right? We really come up with a question, so I'm going to steal the opportunity here to ask a question about, and this is not really a fair question, but the timeline to transfer the culture, because you talked a little bit about that, going from the old style strategy, put it on the shelf, to the new style of making sure that that's an integrated process and changes the culture. Just could you give some thoughts on that and how long that takes?
Well, every company's different, Gary, obviously. It's a harder question that you're going to have to start with a training program and introducing it and moving in that direction. You're not going to have what we call like light speed execution. It's not going to happen overnight. Okay? And even if you're a really well-managed organization, and United is, it takes time. You're going to lose some people along the way, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. But it's going to take a year or two. This is not something that you're going to be able to do overnight. Okay? And even the great companies like General Electric, they struggle with this too. But if you don't do this, the other side of it is you're not going to compete. You're going to lose out, because there are companies that are figuring this out. And when they figure it out, they're moving at light speed. Okay? And your products and your services are going to become really old. And I just wanted to build on with Rich's, and we always bring Rich in on things at the Zellery Institute too. So he also gets a bird's eye view of why he donates his time at the business school, because he gets to see talent too. And you know how to cherry pick. Don't tell anybody, but that's why I like teaching. You get to cherry pick because you get to see the capability. Because when they're in my class for 3.5 months, you can see who rises to the top and who you say, no way, I wouldn't hire that person.
Yeah, and I'll offer up the following perspective on that. The best talent I find is the few students, and it's amazing how few do it, come up to me after and say, oh, Mr. Sheridan, could I have a coffee with you sometime soon? And so those kids that step out of the university, come out into the community, sit down with those of us are the ones that, quite frankly, blow me away when I get to sit down with them. I'm humbled when I sit down with those kids because I'm thinking I'm doing a lot, and they're just blowing me away. They're changing the world.
People may not know who Rich is, but Rich owns the coffee franchise of
I'm a professional coffee drinker.
He's brought more people out for coffee than anybody else. How about another question? Middle table here, John, you got something? Or?
Our question relates to kind of metrics. You talked about the importance.
Speak right into the mic.
You talked about the importance of metrics. When you're going down the path of developing new strategy, how do you know what's the right measure to focus on?
Yeah, it's a hard thing. I'm involved in a lot with Habitat. And we used to measure, when we started looking at our strategy, we used to measure, our metric was how many new houses that we built. And we started looking at, about 40–50% of what we do is not new housing, it's reconditioning housing. So we started looking back at us, and we were putting our strategic objectives in place. We're more than just building new housing. We're actually doing a lot of extra work. And so today our metric is how many families do we capture, okay? Which is a much better number. And I think this comes through this process. There's no cookbook formula that says, here's your business and here's the metrics you should be driving to. But I think having this kind of dialogue with your senior executives, your senior management, and having it where you leave the titles at the door, and you talk about, what should we be driving our business? And how should we be driving our business? And what are the metrics around that business? You'd be surprised how many folks will say, well, I think we're we need to be tracking this types of metrics, not what we've been doing in the past. Okay? But it's a hard question to answer because every business is at different stages and in different businesses. But we really do know. You know, some of the metrics, ROI, return, you're going to have to track those. But you know, if you're a service business, it's really going to become about people and quality of service, and somehow those metrics have to be in place. If you're going to be a manufacturing, you know, it's still some of the old manufacturing inventory turns. Some of those metrics aren't going to go away. But you're going to have to look at, are we really achieving advanced manufacturing? And what are the skill sets that we're going to need to do more integration? We're not going to be the Ford Motor Company, General Motors, just keep pushing the cars out. But make sure we're pushing them out with really great quality. Okay? So you're going to see different metrics. And you know, in business school, we give you about 60 metrics. I would tell you not to use those. I would use the ones that fit for your particular business. Create your own. Be creative on your metrics. Okay? Don't take the textbook formulas. You're going to use some of those, you know, the finance side and so forth, but also on your service side and how you apply it. Be more creative.
With that, I'm going to put Jamie and Kathleen on the spot here because they do services for United, and we've driven the metrics down to that level. I wonder if you guys can talk about how do you measure some of the metrics with providing the services, you know, internally, basically, to the company.
So say the question again. It might still be early.
We're talking about metrics. And how do you tie metrics? So you guys are looking at customer service. Right? They've had a big initiative for the last couple of years about excellent customer service. How do you measure that? What are some of the metrics you use to look at that?
Okay, I think I can get there on that. Well, a couple things. I mean, we really tried to figure out how we could get to the voice of the customer. And it wasn't complete magic, and we sort of used Zingerman's as sort of our prototype. So we spent a lot of time with Zingerman's because they do a really nice job of tracking customer complaints as well as customer best practices. And we kind of took their knowledge base and kind of applied it to our organization. So really being able to track when we don't do something right, kind of what is that? Sometimes it's one-offs, but a lot of times there's some trending to get out of that. And then being able to use that to form what our initiatives are going forward. So trying to really be able to collect the data to be able to kind of challenge where we need to go. But on the best practices front, really being able to celebrate when we do things right. And that really has allowed us to be more focused in the organization. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's perfect. What do you think? Good answer. Jamie asked me to challenge her and keep her on her toes, so.
Because now I need to tell him it has to be after 9 o'clock.
And kind of embarrass Kathleen a little bit here. I actually taught her father, and a wonderful man. We've become very good friends now. And when you talk about marketing research, I learned from your dad. He's the one that comes in and teaches me about what he's doing and the survey methods. His company's called HR Gems here in town. So HR Gems. And I put him in with my MBAs, exec MBAs, and he kicks their butt. It's fun to watch.
How about over here, Scott? Okay. Well, I want to actually, Scott, take the mic because I wanted to. Scott, I thanked you earlier for arranging for Brady Hope to come in. Scott's got a new role at Albion.
Albion College, yeah. I've recently been hired as the director of development at Albion College. It's a small liberal arts college just south of Lansing area. And why I wanted to just let everybody know that we have great talent at Albion College and great students that are always looking for internships. So if you are a company looking for great young talented students, please come see me.
I've used your students in
They're great students.
Yeah, no, you can work for they work for me. I'm sole business owner, so
they're great.
Yeah. Some of our best people are Albion grads, so I put in a good.
Scott, you guys have a question?
We do.
Hi everybody, I'm Adam Kaplan. I recently left an operations role at an innovative medical services company. One of the things that was very frustrating for me in operations is I felt we didn't tie it to strategy. We had the orange and we were squeezing the orange and we kept squeezing the orange until there was no more juice left and we didn't know what to do. So I guess my question for you, Len, is in the spirit of what Herman Miller did, which was integrate a strategic component into all of their meetings, what are some other things that one can do on a regular basis to make sure strategy permeates the organization?
Well, I think it's going back to that, just continuously communicating our goals, not just using meetings, but any special events. As you bring people together, you're going to have to do that. And if you're running the operations side, every day that they have to understand that what they're doing, how they're contributing fits to the overall picture. Okay? And again, it comes back to, do you have a really good communication strategy? And it's not just at meetings, okay, or in the planning process, but it permeates throughout every day, every week, every year. Okay? And I think that's how you're going to get through it too. And send that executive to me who keeps making me squeeze the orders, because they can't be doing that. They're gonna kill the business if they're not careful.
How about a question from your own table there?
Sure.
Anybody?
David.
Oh, student.
So how would you decide on a reasonable balance between the amount of people energy that goes into picking the right talent and leveraging technology to make sure the right talent is selected to go in the right place?
Okay. Okay. As you're leveraging that technology and looking at this, is something that Rob taught me many years is, this is not new. All these personality tests, they're all online today, and I use a lot of that too. And I use the 2x2 matrix. And if you think of upper right-hand corner, that's the driver type people. The lower left is more social or socially quiet type folks. And how do I think about is I'm building a team with skill sets, because I know with in the workplace or even with my MBAs, if I have too many of them up in that right box, they kill each other. Okay? But if I have too many in the lower left box, they don't play well. There's nobody talking, I drive everything, okay? And that's not what I want either. But how do I think about the skill sets on all those boxes? And David, I use technology to do that. It's very simple. And I've worked with Kathleen and Kathleen's father's company and Rob too. And how do you fill out that type of matrices using the technology that allows me to say, okay, make better decisions?
How about, let's see, which table we're missing back here? Okay, Mark?
First of all, thanks, Len. This has been great. Almost too much content. I deal with younger companies, and one of the things that we've discussed over here is how does a newer company think like Michael Dell? I mean, obviously you want to bring the idea of hiring up and hiring smarter, but it's hard sometimes because they're real involved in the day-to-day.
Okay. I think it's pretty... okay. Good question. I'm cherry picking right now. I just got one of my students from about 10 years ago. I got him out of a hedge fund job. He was making too much money. Doesn't need the paycheck anymore. Smart as could be. He was the first BBA I taught that actually beat the MBAs, not only the business plan competitions, but won the innovation award. Okay, and that's judged by MBAs, not BBAs. And I'm bringing him in. He doesn't need a salary. He's just way smart. When he was 22 years old, he went up to the head of global trading and said, I want a job. The guy said, get out. He said, I don't talk to MBAs. He said, I'm not an MBA, I have a BBA. And I'll give you 5 minutes and I'll tell you why you should hire me. So I was his job reference. And the head of global trading at Deutsche Bank called me and said, look, this is a good kid, you're not going to go wrong. This banker called me back 3 months later and said, Len, we gave a test now to this kid. He got the highest score. You know how sometimes with investment bankers, you just so what, that type of thing. And he said, you understand, we've been giving this test for 10 years. He got the highest score in 10 years, and we want to give him some money to manage. Okay? I said, he said, we want to give him $240 million. I said, that's all. So he recently left. He was managing $2 billion a hedge fund for Bank of America. Okay? And he doesn't need to work anymore. And I want him to come back. But to answer your question is, there's talent out there, and they're not always driven by a salary. They're driven by accomplishment. And you just have to be much more pickier how you find these people, especially in the startup, because you want really folks that are builders around you. Not like my friend Jerry, that he brought managers in here, not builders. I made that mistake in one of my early companies. I brought in a manager. I thought the board, everybody had vetted this person saying, you are the executor. And within 3 weeks, he gave me a plan for 10 people. I said, did you not understand when we hired you? You were the 10 people. When the company went public, we were going to be able to have more money to hire our staff, but you were brought in to do that. And we had to fire him. I was mad at myself because I lost 6 months. It was very critical at that time. So you got to spend time making sure you get the right talent, and that they're there, not only they're smart, because you can't teach them if they're smart, but they're there because they want to be there, not because they need that job.
I think that this is an important point about the, I guess you talk about the mission of people around, and I look around this room and realize there's a lot of people that are working on very important things and they're passionate about it. Ken, I know you were involved in a program with Health Media about helping people who have had hip replacement surgery. And I can look all around the room, and I think the best workers are out there are the people that really believe in what you're doing and care about it and are passionate about the work. So I think hiring for that is really an important piece because if you hire somebody solely for their talent, they're going to work on the talent, but they won't be ready for the future. Lisa, you mentioned your passion for BCN, and Kevin Klobuchar was here last month talking about what they're trying to do to get ready for 2014. Well, these are people that are really involved in the healthcare industry that care about delivering great service and care about the healthcare crisis. And I think you can't replace a team of people like that. And if you have somebody on there that's only riding along because they want to make the money or they want to get the power, you need to get rid of those people because they're going to just hold everybody back. So I think that's one of the key things, is just to have that passion. I know you, Rich, since your little storefront just starting up was about, how many years? 5, 6 years ago, maybe? Not that long.
We're going to celebrate our 10th.
10th, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, Rich really had the passion. He's in the software business, though. So how can you have passion? But he wasn't really passionate just about the software. But Rich, you were passionate about building a team, doing it a different way, taking collaboration to software development, which is pretty revolutionary. And I can look around the room, Megan, you had started out with 1 or 2 people, but you're passionate about e-learning, what it's about in the healthcare industry, about really making a difference in people's lives. So I think that's a big part of this whole thing, is that finding those people. And I have to make a pitch for a concern really about our education system, because let me just ask you this, are we training people? We're talking about at the college level. You already got the elite. What do we do about the public education, where so many students are not learning these skill sets? Have you heard about any innovations there, anything that might help think about how we can make an impact on the education system?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm working with Rob with an Israeli high-tech company that is looking at how kids learn. And the guy that's heading this up, he's unbelievable, a real renaissance man. He's a Knesset member. He's been a world-class psychologist. But he's looking at, and he's got a company called Cognitive.com, and he's looking at how kids learn, and he's bucketed them in about 12 different learning styles, and he's using technology to then assess it. So the goal here is to get the child at the end of 9th grade at this level, but taking 12 different ways using technology that you will get each child to that same level, because we all learn differently. And how do we use technology to really start to learn, not 30 kids in a classroom, 20 kids in a classroom, and then try to give them one methodology, and you lose a part of them. But how do we let each kid then take control of their education system, and we call that co-creation part, and really give them that, using the technology to drive them to that kind of space. So I think that's really going to change. I'm working on a project right now with the Hands-On Museum here in town, and we're looking at, can we create an applied technology center where kids would go in, and in my day I had Mr. Wizard, the younger generation had Bill Nye Science Guy. There's nobody out there right now for kids today that are teaching them why math and science are fun. It should be fun, and why it's important that you learn these types of things. So I'm talking with Mel Drum about how do we incorporate some of this applied technology, and as the kids come in, they would learn why math and science are important, and they can see and play with it. And then you couple that with a great engineering school here, and you bring in some of the engineering students who have to create projects. So we have a pipeline of new exhibits and new ways of thinking for them, the kids to play with it and see what the college kids are working on. And then the college kids have to put the educational component in with that as well. So they don't just do their project, there's an educational component to this.
So I'm trying to figure out which cabinet position Len ought to get. And I'm thinking Department of Education. You think that might do it?
I work with enough bureaucrats, sorry.
How about back here, Ron?
First of all, I should start by saying that I'm an MBA, not a BBA, so don't hold that against me. It'll still be a smart question, although I have a BBA right behind me. So at our table, the question was kind of already asked by Gary. So I had another question, which is, you talked a lot about strategy, but could you talk a little bit more about what makes for a really good visionary strategy as opposed to something incremental and evolutionary but not revolutionary? something smart and disruptive but not foolhardy. You know, how do you know when you get to that point, or what's the process for getting to something like that?
Balance. You have to have balance. You have to have the nuts and bolts of how you're running the business today. But you're going to have to get your heads above the hedgerow or the fence to see what's happening, not only in your backyard, but around the world. Okay? Because this change is coming. We're working on a partnership that we're tying Jordan, Israel, Ireland, us here at Michigan, and a facility in Taipei and in Shanghai. And then we're creating a pipe of partnership so that if we see new thinking, new thought leadership, that we're going to be able, as part of this pipeline, that we're going to have such access to technology. So if great technology is created in Jordan, they need access to the U.S. They can come to the University of Michigan, and we'll help them, and we'll create more jobs for our MBAs that way, okay? Because those companies are going to have to come into this market. They cannot wait 5 years to build that company to come into the U.S. They're going to have to come into the U.S. in the first couple of years, okay? And it's going to change how strategy is done, because you got to execute today's business, but you better be looking out for tomorrow and the next few years of how that business is going to evolve. And it's going to be that balance piece, okay? Of how you maintain the model that you're doing now, but knowing that you're going to have to take risks for the model of the future.
We're going to have one more question from Megan Torrance here and wrap it up.
Thank you, because that was a really great intro to our question. We talked about execution takes stamina. And in large organizations, I can understand, very easily how there's a lot of bodies and a little bit of a lot of bodies, and you can have that stamina. Can you talk about some of the ways that smaller organizations have built or created that stamina for execution? Or, if I have to ask the question, is it a talent issue?
Well, I think it's both, but how small organizations do it? Megan's on the hands-on board with me as well. But I think you have to go away. I think companies have forgotten how to do that. We have meetings, you have those types of things, but management needs to go away for a couple of days. And if they're going to put the right emphasis on this, even in small companies, you have to somehow find time to close off the world a minute and talk about who we are, where we're going, how we're going to get there. And we don't do that. We've forgotten that. To go to a site, come over to a place like this, grab the corner booth, and spend a few days in there, and I'm sure Paul and Ari won't mind, and really talk about that step, how you get control of your future. Okay? And you're not going to do that with just a strategy meeting every month or every week. You're really going to have to find time to set the world aside a little bit. And you're right, you're going to need that talent, because somebody's got to be minding the store behind you when you're off doing some of the strategic thinking. Okay? And that's why you're going to need more talent. You're going to be able to, you're going to need to be, as you run your own business, Megan, you're going to need staff that can do the day-to-day while you're off creating the future a little bit too. So, yeah, it's not going to be easy.
That's one of those points I think Lisa and I talk a lot about, is how do you get out of the weeds? How do you get working on the business instead of in the business? And Bob and I talk a lot about that. And that's a big challenge, but it's again that talent build-up so that you can depend on those people to operate your business while you're out thinking about the strategy.
Yeah. Yep.
One more.
I didn't say it was going to get easier.
Let me borrow this back. I just want to do some thank yous here. One thank you is Roger Rayle, who's back here on videos. And Roger, this is going to be available for us to take a look at in a few days.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So Roger has been doing these videos, and it's kind of cool that now the technology is there. We can use these little handhelds and really get good quality video. He does this for A2 Ann Arbor. It's called A2.
I do it for A2 New Tech, Detroit New Tech, Ignite Ann Arbor, Lunch Ann Arbor Marketing.
So he has a lot of, you have a lot of these on your, we have access to these tapes that you've done over the years, or?
Yeah, most of what I do is on the client site. The technology is there that we can share video live and record it. I prefer not to have to edit afterward, because then it takes like 3 times longer, and a lot of this I'm doing pro bono. But for things like this, we'll edit some of the slides into it, so that you don't have to have the sheet in front of you to know what he's talking about. But this is part of what's available now, and one of the things I wanted in this table here, as we discussed it in my head.
Me, myself, and I.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed over the years, and I'm a double alumni from U of M, back in my day, there were startups that were, people that were still in university or just graduated from university. And they tend to be smaller companies. And then for a while there, for a couple decades, the university seemed to only talk to big companies. They wanted to have the big money and things like that. But now in the last several years, 7 or 8 years, it's like the university is trying to push out a lot of the research, monetize it to smaller companies. And I think that's really important. And I think one of the things that it just occurred to me that there needs to be more collaboration between these startup companies and the established large companies to get some of that entrepreneurial spirit back into the large companies. Not just by acquiring them, but at the university level. So the sharing of ideas, churning of ideas that I've been helping with since I retired last year and before, I think that's part of it. There's a lot of stuff going on. You're talking about science education. The Story Collider was just here at the library last Friday. Story Colliders, people from various places around the community, talking about how science influenced their lives at an early age. And that's going to be up again on the library, the Ann Arbor District Library's site here in a couple of weeks. So things like that are happening in the community level outside of the university environment. I think the more the university and the community work together, the better it's going to be for all of us.
Well, I think, Roger, you're going to see that come. And very soon is really pushing this open collaboration with the community. And I can tell you there's a great model to look at with the in Grand Rapids. We work with the Grand Angels group there. And it's more than just Grand Rapids. We brought the 6 universities together. They do a strategic plan for the area, the business plan competitions. And it's a melding of the startup folks with the chairman of Perigo or AutoCam or Herman Miller. And it's been going on for several years now. It's wonderful to watch. We were kind of the folks that helped, we were the catalyst to get it going. And then we stepped back, they run that, and it's a great model. If anybody's interested, you should definitely look at this Grand Angels group and what they're doing out in Western Michigan.
Well, first of all, let's give Len a tremendous hand. And it's just great to get this perspective from Len. A lot of energy. And he's a local guy, so again, born and raised in Michigan, and it's great to be able to keep the talent here that we have and be able to feed it back. We're going to move to announcement phases at this point. If people have to boogie out, you can. I mean, I hope you can stay around because this is actually some of the most interesting things. I'll start. I'm doing a lot of interesting work now with BCN, United Bank, Scott Mertz, but one of the most interesting things is that I'm working with the member of CEO Connect, Rick Snyder and Mike Finney on their economic development team, and they're still looking for talent. So if you know people that want an interesting job, they need a lot of talent to come work with their teams, especially in the area of getting things done. For example, MEDC. The executive order has ordered them to merge with Nishta and they're going to double their size basically and merge with these other agencies in the state. And that's going to take a tremendous amount of work to do. The workforce group is going to all unite. So if you are out there looking for an interesting job opportunity or a consulting opportunity, talk to me. I'd be happy to put you in touch with the right people. But we really want the talent to be able to work. Rick Snyder's embarking on a really tough go of it, and we all have our different views politically, but I think he's trying to bring some of what Len's talking about, really tying strategy and execution together to the state. So this is a great hope for the state, but I think we need to have the right talent to drive it forward. So that's my announcement, and Richard, you have one.
Yep. In the last few months, I've had the great privilege to get to know some authors of a series of books on, that are called Crucial Conversations, Crucial Confrontations, and Influencer. There's a new book about to come out called Change Anything, The New Science of Personal Success. And I'm really excited about this. They are actually using Menlo Innovations as the business example of change anything, and these guys touch millions of people around the world. So that'll be a fun effect on us. But
who's the author?
The author is Joseph Rennie, and he's going to be at the VistaTech Center at Schoolcraft on April 19th. And Rob, what I'll do is I'll send the announcement to you. But I can tell you that...
Send it to Stephanie, and our goal is deep 6 if you don't...
Okay. Well, wherever Stephanie, just give me your card then. But I would highly recommend that. These are great authors, and I've gotten a chance to know several of them. And one of them is going to be at Menlo in a couple of days. So this is really fun stuff. I'd highly recommend it.
You also got some stuff going with Inc., I understand.
Yeah, we just, Inc. just spent about 14 hours with us watching our interview practice, and they're going to write a feature article on how we do interviewing at Menlo. And I think they're tying it to an award that they think we're going to be one of the winners of, but they can't tell us that. So we'll see how that goes. And sort of in the spirit of what's happening in the community, Accuray Cytometer's sale to BD actually closed yesterday, and that was a very neat event for Menlo because we were a pretty big stakeholder.
Congratulations. There are other cool things going on in town. Bill, I wonder if you could announce the start of your clinical trial, because Bill Breakerhoff's part of the pharmaceutical company in town that's started a major clinical trial.
Yeah, my name is Bill Breakerhoff, and our company is Serenus Therapeutics, and we work in the field of HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol. We've been trying, it's a core group that was formerly with Aspirion, plus another, a whole group from around the world. And like a lot of other startup companies, we're trying to rebuild the life science corridor here, with the departure of Pfizer. And we've just passed our 5th year anniversary, and we have been working for a long time to bring this synthetic HDL, that if you have a lot of HDL naturally, you're protected against heart disease. And we've been working on a way to make this synthetically, and we have announced this week that we've started the largest trial ever with an HDL mimetic program with 500 patients. So it's going to be a major study taking place over the next year and a half in 50 centers around the world. And so I think it's a big milestone for us that we've been working on for a long time, but also on our road back to kind of a healthy biotech corridor here, we're hoping to contribute. So that's our news.
Step back over here. I'll have my back to Roger and the video camera. But I'm Carol Camp. I own Encore Online Resale over in the Colonial Lanes Plaza on South Industrial. And I just wanted to announce a sort of a save the date for Thursday, April 28th. We're going to do an open house from 4 to 7 p.m. that day, jointly with our neighbors, our new neighbors, Cartridge World. We're going to have a little open house and a ribbon cutting ceremony with the Chamber of Commerce.
Wait a minute, the Cartridge is having a ribbon cutting?
Is that a typewriter reference?
Yeah, that's right, showing our age.
Kids don't know what a typewriter ribbon is.
I know. But I'd like to invite everybody to come join us. We're going to have door prizes and drinks and food, maybe a little wine tasting, and should be a great time. That's Thursday, April 28th from 4 to 7 p.m.
Anybody else have an announcement? Looking for something, has something to offer, whatever. Or once? Len, you got something?
Yeah, I was going to just real quickly. We have these map projects that Rob mentioned. They're called multidisciplinary action projects, and there's very little cost with it. And right now we run a full cycle. So if your company needs some help, we have projects with exec MBAs, day MBAs, and even undergrads who do some amazing work. It's very little money to do this, and it's around the clock. So we always need a feeding system of projects, and I can tell you, you'll really benefit from it. It's not only the smart folks, but you get a product at the end that's really geared to what your company or organization needs. It's not an academic exercise. It's really geared to help you. And Mike, you did it many years ago. Yeah, so they did.
In our office, they were great.
Yeah, and I think Patricia had somebody too. Just a note, if you're thinking about this and you're looking for some help, you can easily, I can put you in touch with some folks to try to get you a team.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up. Please feel free to stay.
I got a couple.
Oh, Roger's got a couple here. One more.
Yeah, if you haven't already signed up, TEDx U of M is going to be April 8th, all day Friday. How many have how many have been to a TEDx or a TED conference? It's going to be at the Michigan Theater, so there's 1,700 seats.
Yeah, let me say something about that. I've gotten to know the kids that are running. This is some of the talent we talked about, Len. This is a totally U of M student-led, created, managed event. And if they pull it off, if they fill the Michigan Theater, this will be the largest TEDx event in the country.
In the world.
And, yeah, I think they're bumping up around the world. But they're also trying to do a video feed, and I challenged them to say, try and get 113,901. So anyways, I would highly recommend it.
And I need somebody to cover my back next week because I'm going to be working with the Afghan mission at the U of M, not U of M, but U of N, the United Nations. So I've got a really great opportunity to work with this mission that do team building, executive team building. So this stuff is pretty cool, but Len's a little worried about my safety, so if any of you want to cover my back, please be there for me. Should be real interesting. So we'll see y'all next month for our Pasik. And then I had one other thing. You mentioned Herman Miller field trip. How many of you would be interested in getting on a bus and going to Herman Miller with Len and getting a tour of Herman Miller, maybe spending the day on the road? We should think about taking CEOConnect on the road. I've been at that tour. Rick Reed is part of this group. So that would be pretty cool. We'll send an announcement, see how many people do that, try to cost out what it would cost to share a bus. Maybe we go for tulip time. That would be fun to haul this one.
There you go.
All right, so we'll see y'all next month.